Hello there. Welcome to our Friday Night Spiritual Insights with Michael Mirdad. It's great to have you with us again. One of you asked a couple weeks ago, and I've just not gotten to it, and I just remembered you had asked to talk about what is the ego. So very simply stated, we all have a couple of different parts. There's a spiritual us, represented in our upper three chakras. There's an ego, human ego part of us. It's not separate. The human is created by the ego. So the human ego is almost redundant because they're the same. Now, some people say, well, no, I love my beautiful human part. Again, give me a second on that, because the ego has completely hijacked the world, politics, science, religion, and human beings. Lower three chakras, it's symbolized there. There's a third part of you and I, which is the heart, that chooses between our identity being a divine I am or an ego-based I am not. So there's that which I am, that which I am not, and the heart and soul of each of us decides this every day. And it would be just beautiful if people could go, wow, that makes so much sense. They lock in and they're just going to live that from now on. But the ego doesn't give up like that. The ego will try to undermine every thought. Not only does it control fears and control us through fear, which it looks like the world is doing, then we don't like the world, we don't like politicians, we don't like the news and all that. But they're just the puppets, they're just the symptoms. Hidden behind it is where we have allowed and empowered our ego to keep us afraid and therefore manifest voices such as sciences or politics or whatever to look the role. But they're just playing the role given to them by our ego selves. When we retire the ego self, then this doesn't continue. It's simple, really. So what is the ego? The ego is that which I am not. What is divinity? It's the God I am. And it's clever, beautiful wording in that sense. Look how simple. I am that I am, and the ego is that which I am not. But if it's the ego which I am not, then even the ego is being seen as something I am not. And, you know, we have, you think needs, human needs, but in the I am having no needs. I am hungry, I am thirsty, I am angry, that's not the I am. That's that which I am not. The I am not is hungry, angry, needy, wanting, resentful, competitive, and so on. It's the ego I am not. So if we practice seeing the distinction between these two, it's easier to then make a choice which one I want to follow as my guide. A Course in Miracles is a very... It's a teaching that's adamant at making clear what is the ego so that it's not something we would choose. It doesn't downplay it. Some teachings out there, they say, oh, don't think about the negatives or the downside of things. Only focus on the positives. No, focus on the positives, but do be aware that you're walking through a dark tunnel towards the light at the end. Because the dark tunnel is all the many voices of the ego that I am not, telling me that that is what I am, and it's lying. Even when the ego is telling us to say, I am sick, well, the divine I am cannot be sick, because it's divine. However, when I forget that I'm divine, I can be sick. In fact, it's a sick thought to think I'm not divine, therefore it would manifest as a sickness if you think about it. So, so this becomes challenging for some people to wrap their mind around, because the divine I am, the ego I am not, are these two different, completely different voices, guides, teachers. They both fully believe they exist. They both truly want our allegiance to them, but they have completely different goals and outcomes. One, complete oneness with all that is. The other, division, 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 which is why I mixed the title here with the 6 foot distancing equaling the 6 foot under. Not because it's wrong to do social distancing, but it's the fear behind it. It's that one more symptom of you stay over there and I'll stay over here. one more, just one more. Don't hug, don't touch, don't look at, I mean, it's funny, like you wonder, are they going to eventually say looking at another person can transfer viruses or can make people sick or depressed or whatever else it is. And what we see in the outside world is a mirror of what's going on in the inside. And the more I identify with the divine I am, the less I'm listening to the ego I am not. But it is important for me to know that there's an ego I am not, so that when it does rear its ugly head, which is constantly, and tell me to listen to this voice and that voice and buy into this and buy into that fear, I learn to see, because I now know what it is, seemingly, what it is not in reality. Now I know what the ego is about. Now I know how to recognize it. So, human beings, they have this propensity they nurture feelings, they fall in love with somebody, and it doesn't take long for them to become disillusioned and angry. Is it really always because everybody lets us down? Or is it that maybe I have a pattern of that? So basically, you're on borrowed time, man. You are up creek. We meet, we connect, we bat eyelashes, but it's a matter of time that I'm going to say, wait, this time I batted mine and you took a minute before you batted yours. Maybe you didn't bat your eyes quickly enough, and maybe you don't love me anymore. Maybe all we're going to do is project all our stuff in other people that don't look like they're living up to our expectations. But why am I having expectations? Those are coming from the ego I am not. So we've got really these three parts: the divine I am, the ego I am not, and a soul in between, located in the heart center, that's choosing between these two voices. And we do have to become very proficient in knowing those two voices apart from one another, and then taking responsibility and owning when we're listening to the right voice. Very simple. To put it another way, an even simpler way, when I'm listening to the voice of real love, the closest thing you and I will know on planet Earth to real love is unconditional love. Unconditional love doesn't fall out of love. It doesn't lose love. It doesn't switch from love to hate. It's not a love-hate relationship. It's not codependent. True spiritual love. I cannot say an ill word about you if I'm in God. It's impossible. I can't say an ill word. I can't even laugh at you sarcastically if I'm in God. It doesn't happen. There's no toxicity in my mind or my words about you. My desire would be that we love and we get along and we sort things out, we communicate. But the ego in the meantime is going, no. If you have a challenge with somebody, your children or your ex or whatever, if you're having a challenge with somebody, somebody's got to pay. Because if you're having a challenge, you're not happy. If you're not happy, who's done this to you, you poor thing, says the false loving, God, ego, pretending to be God, pretending to be the voice of God. It's the ego just lying, pretending to care for us. Oh, darling, did someone hurt you? You should hate them. And we buy into it. Just, who's going to say no to that? How many of you can say, at least once this week you caught on to it and said, no, I refuse to sink into my ego self. I refuse to think the thoughts or speak the words towards somebody that would have been me succumbing to my ego self. Say no, say no. I've said many times, you guys have to have caught on by now, I've said many times that for me, when I see somebody is determined, absolutely determined to turn on me and become hateful towards me, I might initially see if there's something I can do to create a miracle of healing between us. But if I see you're determined, it won't matter. Jesus is saying when he's, before his critics, judges, Pharisees, Pilate, Herod, he basically stopped talking to them. They're like, well, no, wait, this is where you defend yourself. And he's like, why bother? You are already determining what you want. You guys have an agenda. You want to judge me, so get it over with. Would you like me to walk out to the cross now? I mean, let's just get it done, because this is what you're going to do. He told Judas at the Last Supper, Judas, you know that thing you're going to do? Yes, Master. What, Master? Come on. You know that thing you're going to do? Go do it. Go get it over with. And Judas was like, well, wait. I was conflicted and so on. And Jesus is like, no, you're not conflicted. You really do want to just do things your way, think your way, and do what you want to do. So get it over with. Peter, you're going to deny me. Oh, I would never. Yes, you are. So there's a time when it's not that Jesus is trying to endorse that we give up on people. It's just to recognize that when people are determined to love you, they're going to love you. When they're determined to hate you, they're going to hate you. A Course in Miracles explains this, and it's very complicated in a way. And it's saying that before the person ever even does something to tempt you to not like them, you have already made up your mind to not like him, and now it's happening just to verify. Almost like this is just simply the manifestation. So you and I have to become very determined to see things differently. Determined to say, no, I'm not going to lose faith. If I'm a mother and my child's become an addict, I refuse to see them as an addict. That doesn't mean you don't drive them to a rehab, or that you tell them no more money because you're using it for drugs. Take care of that part of it. But refuse on a deep spiritual or soul level, refuse to see them as that identity. That might be their behavior. It's not their identity. Someone can even die. They're not dead. They can seem dead, fine. It's fine, they seem dead. But they're not. It's not who they are. They're not addicts. They didn't die. They didn't commit suicide. They never got sick. None of that is true, which sounds like I'm completely preaching delusion here. Let's all just be delusional, but I'm not. All I'm saying is that there's two realities and one chooser in between those two. Two realities. And one of them is God's and one of them is made up by us. We essentially thought we separated from God once upon a time. We felt terrible that something has happened, because thoughts surely create. So if we thought what it would be like to be separate from God, it must have happened. So now we felt so bad that we said we need to create some way of blasting our minds apart. My mind did it, my consciousness, I chose to separate. That's horrible. So I want my consciousness to blast apart so that it can never be reassembled. And then I'll never remember that I destroyed love. And that's an amazing sentence right there. Every time you and I judge each other, we're destroying love again. God, every time you believe that your child is hopeless, you're destroying love. Every time you decide to hate a race, a gender, think of someone lesser. Every time you decide to hate a Democrat or a Republican, anytime you hate and justify that hate, you're blasting love apart. Trying to destroy God, fortunately, which can't be destroyed, but you can destroy your entrance, your doorway into oneness with that love. And we do it every time that we judge. To me, 6 foot distance is, I say that sarcastically about, that's like 6 foot under, because it is like 6 foot under. It's, we're buried in fear, so we distance with each other. But if we follow A Course in Miracles, then what it's going to say is, you had already determined to stay apart from each other, and you manifested a virus that you have to now do that. It's not saying it's not there. It's not saying it's wrong to feel like you have to distance. Go ahead. Now that you believe it, go ahead and distance. You have to do that. It's right to do, I guess, right? But it's saying, but why did you ever manifest that? Because inside, you folks wanted to divide. Now, the good news is, the only reason we would ever collectively create a concept of we better separate would be because there's a part of us that must have been feeling greater love on this planet. The ego will not try to impose new levels of separation unless it feels threatened with some current version of love that we were theorizing or feeling inspired to experience. And more of this can happen, honestly. More things can happen to create distancing. You're trying to build walls between nations, or you're trying to shut off migrations, and that's fine. It could be good or not good. It's to each his own. But what I'm saying is, when one isn't working, the ego's trying another, and it's trying another. It used an election to divide people, strongly divide people in America, and then in the world as well. So it uses terrorism in some regions, so that again, division. And who would say, well, I support that? Or who would say, I support us having viruses? Nobody would want to admit that we support it, but we are supporting it when we think separation in any form is right. However, once we start acting it out, it becomes appropriate to set certain boundaries and say, look, this person's a criminal that overtly causes harm to people. They might need to be separated and put away somewhere. Is that a solution? No, but right now it is helpful. And it's helpful to keep social distancing. And it's helpful to say no to certain people if they want to create wars or whatever. That's right to do once we're that far. But before that ever happened, there were thoughts of hate and fear and a desire to keep away from each other, and then it manifested as the other. So all I'm saying is, give to Caesar what's Caesar's. Take care of that practical stuff. Get distanced and all that. But let's also give to God what's God's, and find a way to not only forgive judgmental thoughts, but please try to cancel them out as they're coming in. Get behind me, Satan, Jesus said, means when temptation stands in front of you, say no. Get out of my way. Don't tempt me to think this way about this leader, this politician, this religious leader, this parent or whatever. You can know that if your parents were hurtful, that they were hurtful. You don't have to choose to hate them. You can stay away from them without hating them. The ego doesn't want you to know what boundaries can do in a healthy way. Because, it's like, oh, we can't have that. If you have healthy boundaries, then you'll have no sense of being attacked, or you'll have no fears. Can't have that. Got to keep you feeling, attacked and threatened with no boundaries and no right to say, no, this doesn't work for me. So all that has to change. We created the ego. We manufactured the ego. We thought we separated from God. We made the ego to take the blame for blasting our mind apart. And we could say, well, God, the only reason I'm struggling with my ex is because, or my oneness with God is because, and so on and so on. I'm only distancing from people, because I'm told to. They're all ways to avoid responsibility. The truth is, if we know who we are, the real I am, that which I am, my walking up to you and being in a hugging embrace should be able to heal any being that you hug, if you know who you are. But that doesn't always work that way. So in this world, we don't believe that anymore. So we think my safety comes from separation in whatever form. My safety comes from separation. And it all originated with the ego, trying to make sure we never go home to God. And one way to know we're going home to God is when we start to feel like we're one, not separated, but where we're feeling one. So quite a seeming event that we've gotten ourselves into. I know it's a lot to hear, some people don't like, anybody saying these kinds of things, because it seems like, first of all, threatening to the ego's world, but also it becomes very almost conflicting inside, because some of us go, well, I didn't do it. And I don't remember doing this. I don't remember creating an ego. Some of us even tried the other route. Instead of just seeing real bluntly like the ego has no value other than to cause us harm. And it's not the ego that's somewhere else. It's in me. It's a choice I make every day to listen to. Empower that voice of the ego and let it become a guide of some kind. It's one I make every day again and again. But I can also try the opposite. Instead of like just shut the door on that, there's people that, I've heard that you can pet your ego into submission, and it's really just a misunderstood thing, or it's just a shadow self that means well. None of that's true. Those are all, and if you know me, you know I tried my best to reconcile all traditions and let everything have its place. Some just can't. At the end of it, I could still try to be nice and make ego reconciled. For some of you that go, I don't like to think of the ego as something that wants to destroy me. I could say, well, let's put it lighter and more mild or whatever. But truly speaking, I can't. You can't actually pet it into submission. That's factual. It cannot happen. Well, if we love it, well, no, that will not happen. You could think of it like that guy Caesar who does the dog whispering. He saves all these dogs, does all these amazing things, but there's a point. He says some animals are so primally abused and or have a gene that's off in some way that they will not stop biting and attacking, at which time he agrees. He'd rather not, but he has to agree to put it down. It's kind of like that. The ego is way beyond something that can be repaired because it was made to be angry, so it remains. It's not like it got hurt and got angry like an abused animal. It is already made that way by us. We were creating the ego when we were hurt and afraid and angry, when we chose to be separating from God and then got upset inside about it. We created the ego, so we created it from an upset space. God, which is love, created me like itself, so I'm made in the image of God, which is love. Well, the ego is not made in the image of God, which is love. The ego is made in the image of my state of anger or upset or fear. Therefore, it is that. And so we gave it full permission to go into our consciousness and take over. Only one condition: make sure I never again remember my oneness with God. That was the condition. The ego was made and told you can live forever. You get to take over and have dominion. One condition: never let me remember my oneness with God. Well, why would we want that? Because if you remember your oneness, you're going to remember that you also chose to separate, and that's going to feel terrible. So to cover that explosion of terror, upset at ourselves, we thought, I'd rather die a little every day than to feel this mass, instantaneous explosion of hurt inside of myself. So fine, bring it on a little every day. And the ego's like, right on. Okay, I'll meter it out, measure it out, give you steady doses of misery, but you won't like it, but you'll have some days which seem okay, so you'll kind of balance that out in life. A little bit terrible, but you'll have some good days, so you'll get by. Good days, bad days, love-hate lifestyle. And that was good enough, believe it or not, for you and I to say, well, that sounds reasonable. It's like, that's nuts. But some people can agree to that. Some people can say, well, if I forget that I'm prosperous and I want to take a house, buy a house and pay it off in 5 years, if I don't believe I can do that, I don't mind you talking me into taking it on a 50-year payment plan. Why? Because I don't know that I can do better and pay it off sooner with no interest. When I'm on the 50-year plan, I've actually paid for the house like 10 times. Nobody thinks it through. It's weird. Nobody thinks it through and realizes, wait, but I'm gonna buy this house 3 times, 5 times, whatever, by the time I'm done with it, just on interest. So the ego loves that long-term payment plan. The more suffering, the better, because it assures its continued existence. So the ego is like this software that we downloaded into ourselves. We permitted to go in. But the software is absolutely, purely corrupted, viral software. And it runs through our whole consciousness. And it takes that spiritual Norton antivirus program called the Holy Spirit of God to enter our minds and heal our minds of the program, the software that is viral, that goes in and horrible worm virus, horrible, oh my God, the way it works and destroys all my programs, which is my belief systems, corrupts all my files, which are my day-to-day, encounters and things that I do, my relationships. So the ego is just constantly causing destruction like this. So you don't pet it into submission. You can't even beg it to like give you, to ease up. It has no ability to reason. And a good metaphor is, I think they call him Gollum and Smeagol, that pair in Lord of the Rings. You have this, it's interesting, you have this character that at moments, big blue eyes, and maybe the Hobbit likes me. And then the other voice, no. The other voice is paranoid, angry, destructive, murderous. But the other one's like, but I think he likes us, the master, the Hobbit. And the other one's, no, don't trust anybody. And that's what it's like. And if you think about it, notice how that character, to the very end, is letting its paranoid, hateful self destroy its life. There's moments when it looks like the human part almost could come through and say, no, I want to believe in love, but it doesn't last because the ego's not going to give in. It's kind of a nice moment, and I think in one of the movies there was a moment, I think, where the one softer self said to the other, I don't want to hear you anymore. Back off. And it had to say it several times like an affirmation, like a decree. No, I'm not interested in your voice. And then it was gone and it said, we're free, we're free. Very, very cool in that sense. But the ego doesn't stop. It might go away for a moment, seemingly. Its voice might be reduced to where it's inaudible because there's another voice we've chosen to hear instead, which is love. So, basically it's like we're suffering from some form of an amnesia when we start thinking that we're the ego I am not. It's like an amnesia, and you can't hate or wrong somebody for having amnesia, but what you would want to do is try to bring them back to who they are, and that's what you and I call the spiritual path. Our working back more and more towards our identity, working on our amnesia. So, you could think of it that way. The ego is addictive, it's self-serving, the ego is codependent, needy. Anything that says I am not whole. I am not who I once maybe thought I was. I am not divine. All of those voices, which means I'm not happy, I need a drink. I'm not healthy, I need this. I'm not, so I need a relationship. Yeah, it's the voice behind all addiction. If you really do even 12-step work properly, you won't just look at your behaviors. You're going to look deeper at patterns. And then truly behind patterns, if you're doing deep step work, truly behind patterns, you're inevitably going to find yourself facing the ego itself. And the ego would like you to think that's the most terrifying experience we could ever have. But it still has to be done. And is it scary? Well, it'll seem scary, but it's not really scary because the ego doesn't really exist. We manufactured it. It's something we made up. So how scary is it? Well, there's times when I've had and people have had like computer problems and, I remember somebody said, oh my God, computer got hacked. What do I do? And I said, well, call this guy. The guy 10 minutes later, all done, cleaned up, protected. That's what it's like to call on the Holy Spirit. It's like the ego's going to make it all look so much worse than it is, but there's a different voice that we can hear. That's not easy when it's your child. That's not easy when it's your partner's sibling and things are going weird. I mean, it isn't. It's a drag when friends, do certain things, or when a child that you love is ill or passes away. I mean, who thought that's why I was having a kid? Who thought when they're having a baby, oh, pregnant, you see that baby, that you think, 10 years, 20 years from now, this will happen? Nobody's usually got that in their mind. So it's really, really breaking to the heart and the mind to see the stuff that the world does. So we're asking almost the to not believe in what our eyes see, and instead to not believe, to know, not just believe, but to know that only God is. To know that only I am. That's why when Moses says, "What's your name, God?" I am that I am. It's just I am. That's it. Period. Exclamation point. Like that. It's just, that's all. No, but can you give us a name? Like, Moses was doing like the ego scientific reporter. Can you give us your name? We want background, And it's just like, God's not going to answer at the level you want. God will try to meet you at the level you want, but it's not going to placate your ego. It's just going to try to meet you at the level you're at, meaning your level on your way up. On your way down and your attempt to ruin God, it's not going to succumb to that. So on your way down, God says, well, let me know when you've hit bottom and I'd like to help you up. I'm not falling with you, but I will rise with you and meet you at your whatever level you're at when you want to rise. And that many of you would recognize that kind of hitting bottom, as a 12-step concept, but it's for everybody. What is bottom for you? When is it enough? How much hate, how much gossip? Do you want to tell the kids stuff about your ex? Really? Do you want them to hate the ex? Is that really what you want? Well, no, but I just want them to know that I was the better parent. Just, they'll get that. They'll get that eventually. Any goodness from either parent, they'll get it if there was any. They'll figure that out. And if they don't want to figure it out, it's because they don't want to know. They want to hate, they're going to hate. So you have to let them go. God lets us fall as far as we need to fall, and you and I, made in God's image, can also let people fall as far as they want to fall. That doesn't mean you want them to fall, but you can't prevent people from having free will. So let them do what they're going to do. When they do hit bottom, and you do hear that they're trying to climb up, throw a rope. Instead of saying, no, because on your way down you were hurtful. Just throw them a rope, help them out. And when I say that, I want to add, the best you can. If someone molested your children, you found out a week ago, I'm not asking you to start throwing them a line yet. I'm going to say, no, first we grieve. First we deal with safety issues. We have to deal with that stuff. While we're in this world, deal with the stuff of this world. Let's do that. At the same time, there will come a time when you'll feel like they know not what they do, so I can throw them a rope. I don't agree with this or that or the other, but I'm willing to throw them a rope. And the day will come, actually, when we'll realize we've all been in the pit and asking someone to throw us a rope. Everybody's been there at one time or another, one lifetime or another, and it's right for us to love and be compassionate and patient. You don't have to jump in the pit. Remember that. That's rescuing, enabling, codependence. But if somebody truly wants, remember Jesus said, if somebody truly repents, then help them. But he is using that caveat there of truly repents. When somebody repents, it means that they're sincerely apologizing and trying to make a change. Your ego is not going to do that. But your patterns and your behaviors can be seen, put in perspective, and let you make a different choice. Now you're repentant, as they call it in the Bible, or apology and amends, if you're talking recovery program. So when we get in touch with that true I am presence, it's our spiritual self. Anytime you have said, I refuse to believe in any low self-worth, low self-esteem, and undeserving statements or thoughts towards myself, that was the I am, which is God, ultimately, speaking inside of you. Think about that. Every time you said, you know what, I've been horribly abused as a child, and I had learning disabilities from it, I had self-esteem issues, I had this, but you know what? No. I'm ready to be a brilliant artist. I'm ready to sing songs about this, about life. I'm willing to become a good spiritual person, a Christian minister, whatever, just a counselor, whatever. Not based on my abuses, but based on my soul saying, here's what I'm about, and then do it. Come out. That's the I am presence. Even if you're in battle, literally or figuratively, if you're in battle and you find yourself going, oh my God, I'm feeling sick. When Jesus said, one of you is going to betray me and one of you is going to deny me. Now the betrayer is already like, denial. Those are our friends that do stuff to us and they want to pretend they're all loving or whatever. And that's done. That's like, here we go. Then you have denial, the friend who won't go so far as to literally like Judas you, betray you and full on. They'll just sort of play lukewarm like, no, who? Michael, who? Joan, who? Sally, who? They're just, when it's time to jump ship for their own, appearance or whatever, then they're going to be like Peter in denial. But don't forget there's an apostle named John who was absolutely faithful to Jesus. And yet John just said, after Jesus' statement, John just said, I'm sick. I feel sick to my stomach. Because that's also in us. Judas is in us potentially, Peter, and John too. John, I'm sick at heart. I'm sick. I'm feeling like part of me just died, Jesus. Who would do such things to you? So there's that part in us too, that feels and wants everything to be okay. Why can't everybody be truthful and faithful and honest and responsible? Recovery programs or whatever. There's a part of us that would like that too. Including, especially like if it's our children or loved partners and all that. Oh my God, I'm sick at heart. My partner, I just found out, they're in love with somebody else. My partner has been out of love with me for years. Sick at heart. That's where it feels like love in some form has gone and you feel alone again. What you're re-experiencing is the feeling of separation. And the ego is like, yes, that person was so faithful. They were so vigilant. They were on the path. This is your true spiritual soul person, not the weak human. This is a good soul who says, got it. John was considered the like a heart chakra, gospel or person for that matter. But still, sick at heart. And it takes Jesus saying, it'll be okay. I appreciate your tenacity. I appreciate your loyalty. The God self is saying to your tenacious, committed soul, you can do this. But the soul is heartbroken, and trying to figure out, what do I do with this? Reality's got broken. And so allow Krishna to speak to Arjuna, allow the Christ to speak to John and say, hey, you know what? I love you, man. I appreciate your tenacity and so forth. This is this world. So even though you're a high consciousness within this world, you're still in this world and things are going to happen like this. And I want you to know that I'm going to pull you through. Trust in me and I'm going to pull you through. So that's like a final test to go from being heart-centered to God-centered in consciousness. You'll go from a heart-centered individual, as seen in people like Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, John the Beloved, those characters who were like totally heart-centered people, and the Christ, they're still not all the way home. The Christ has to say to each of them, you're going through one final test. The test that isn't the guttural stuff, because you're beyond that. Good job. It's good that you're beyond all that, primal level tests. You're all the way up to your heart. Nice, nice, nice. But in the heart test, you're still going to be tested to believe that something has failed. Your child failed. They're mentally ill, they're addicts, that they failed. No. Say no to them to the temptation to believe any of that. You can see it and deal with it externally, but refuse to believe it. You can learn so much to refuse to believe ego and to believe in God's version of things, that belief can be so strong that it'll pull the light of God down all the way to the root level of human beings, and you can heal people from addictions and so on. That can happen. Your child could become transformed. I'm not saying just accept that they are the way they are, just stay in your heart. No. I'm saying refuse to believe what you see humanly, stay in your heart, but turn your heart to God and say, God, how would you have me see all this? Let God then descend, so to speak, descend into your heart and start blasting through how you see and experience the externals, the details, the symptoms, and say, you want to see this how I see it? Then here's how I see it. Boom, light comes blazing through and you'll feel healed. And so will the people around you. People that you thought were hopeless. For now, I better put up boundaries because my ex, they're just hopeless. Their behaviors, everybody knows. They're hyper-aggressive and so on and so on. And yet you're saying, but no. They might act like that, but I know. Not I think. I know that there's God presence in that person. And this light comes beaming through and then they get it. How often? I don't know. It depends on how committed you are to beaming that light through. I will say that when it happens, for me personally, I'm sure that there are a few people that just refuse to see the light. But amazingly, the real impressive ones are the ones that turn and start feeding off the dark stuff in their mind about me or about whatever, and then they bounce back and go, I totally get it. I totally get it. I mean, I would imagine that has happened with like I'm sure it was in her mind somewhere, my former wife from a million years ago, 30 years ago or whatever it was. I'm sure that some things entered her mind now and again, and I think that in a great way, I know that she's also come out of that saying, wow, why did I ever believe what other people said? Why did I ever believe what my ego said? And I'm not boasting here. I'm actually saying it's such an honor. It's really miraculous when people can come through their ego. It is nothing shy of it. It's what a miracle is when people can transcend their ego and allow God's will to be done. It's not just about parting the sea, and it's not just about raising sick people. It's about walking through relationships back to a point of where there's hope. And it's little things too. I mean, I've told stories about in my backyard, I might find, a snake. And maybe one day in the past, or maybe people I know would have went, oh, snakes, kill it. But I found myself, one got tangled in a net that's over, some plants. And I found myself cutting it out of the net to free it. It was like, that's a sort of a metaphor, you see? It's a metaphor of healing and not hating. Even your ego, you can't hate because it's not real. It's going to be tempting. You're going to say, oh, I hate having addiction and it comes from my ego, so I hate my ego. No, your ego's just talked you into doing it. You still made the choice. So no good ego, no bad ego. It's just, just let it be. There's a quote from A Course in Miracles I'm going to read for you, please. There is a light in you which is so holy that the world is actually sanctified because of it. Now, I pulled that aside because the world, think about this. There's a light in you that's so holy that the world, not those of you who are nice. It's not just blondes. It's not just tanned people. It's all beings throughout all time are being told there is a light in you that's so profoundly holy that everywhere you walk, the place is made sacred from your presence. Okay, wait. Oh, they must have been talking about like Jesus or something, right? Not me. I've been a heroin addict, or not me. And you think of people that easily could be excluded. Could you picture a presidential press conference where reporter, yes. I just want to say, Mr. President, Mrs. President, depending on who's aware, I'd just like to say that there is a light in you that's so holy. This room is blessed. This town is sanctified. DC, This country is being brought to a new level. The whole world is being enveloped in light because of your presence. Can you picture that? Well, that's saying no. Of course, most of us would not imagine that, but that's exactly why it doesn't happen, because nobody has held the vision of it yet. Nobody has said, I refuse to believe anything but this. Everybody, the most murderous, there is a light in them. We're not saying they're aware of the light. We're not saying the light is obvious and apparent. Our job is to love the hell out of them so that that light can become more apparent. My safety does not lie in divorce. My safety does not lie in 6 feet apart or 6 feet under. Literally, because death doesn't protect us either. My safety is not determined by how many dollars I own. My safety, my self-esteem is not determined by my credentials or my role at work. My office, I hold nothing. It's only when I identify with the God I am instead of the ego I am not. That's where my safety lies. And the safety actually stimulates on a cellular level immunity. So yeah, you feel more immune to illness, but also to people and their behaviors. You see through them. It's still sad that people do what they do, but you bounce back more quickly. It doesn't mean you're bad for mourning the loss of a child. God, clearly that's normal to mourn while you're in this world. So do that which seems right in the moment. But you can still say, and you know what? I had this weird vision where they told me they're not dead. And they told me they're very blissfully happy. And they told me that they're preparing a place for me to come and be with them soon, or whenever it's going to be. Wow, that's a whole different view of death. And that can happen. Visions, yeah. But before you have visions, go ahead and just believe it without having to have proof and evidence. So the ego was created by us. The ego has no intention to be wooed or lulled or whatever into submission. No, it's just, it's our fear and hatred put in a role of a throne of power and then controlling our lives. The only way we can deal with it is to see it for what it is and choose against it. Not fight it, choose against it. Choose the other voice, the one that speaks of love and forgiveness. Whatever you've done to yourself or others, recently or long past, apologize and make amends. Don't let yourself buy into what people tell you or what your eyes tell you or what your senses tell you. That you are holy even if you have no money or prosperous. It's just not shown yet in that form. You're whole and healed even if you're sick and you die. Even though you can't see it in that form, you are whole and healed. You're lovable whether your partner says so or not. You're sexy and beautiful, but I mean that even on a soul level. I don't mean just like physically. I just mean to just know that you are all that you need to be and practice feeling complete. That's what Jesus meant by the lilies of the field. They don't get all tense. There's no lily going, damn, if I would have only been a rose. It doesn't happen. They're completely a lily, a daisy, a rose, whatever they are, completely content. Contrary to what your head might tell you, there's no bee that wishes it was a horse, no horse that wishes it was a lion. It doesn't exist in nature, but we've slipped out of nature into ego nature, which isn't natural at all. And so we follow a different guide and nothing's content, nothing's at peace. So I pray that this is making good sense and can be applied. Please make some notes about this so that it's really applicable. Where are you getting it? Where are you not getting it? Where are you applying this? Where are you not applying it? Just even if you just took 10 minutes, where am I getting it and where am I not? And when I'm not getting it, is it because I don't intellectually understand it, or is it am I resisting it? Look for it and uproot it. Just tolerate no ego voices in your head. And everything that was ever good friends, even if they were just good friends for a while and they passed away or whatever, like if anytime you've had a truly good family member, a truly good friend, a truly good acquaintance, a truly good workmate, anything you've ever had truly good, animals included. Anything you've ever had truly good, give thanks and never stop giving thanks for it, because then you can create more. And when the world hits you with 4 of negative type of relationship for one really beautiful one, that looks outnumbered, but just see the 4, learn what you can from them, refuse to hate them, and send them off with a mind, thought, prayer of love. And then get into giving thanks for what you learned from the 4, but give thanks for the 1. Just because it's the minority doesn't mean it should be ignored. It'll be fanned into a greater flame if we can give thanks for even 1 good here and there. All right? And thank you. Any of you who have been, faithful students or friends, I always think of friends as students and students as friends. Real close friendship needs time to develop for any of us. That's healthiness. And then if it becomes an intimate friendship, should take time for that too to develop. But truly, any of you who have felt like, you've been faithful and good to yourself, to God, to me as a teacher, I just want to thank you so that you know that it doesn't go unnoticed. It's not just, well, we're supposed to be that way. Please, please feel the gratitude. Because us being grateful to each other really makes a difference for us in ways unseen, even on the other side. All right? So God bless you all, and thank you for your time.